Welcome to Life List, a birding podcast.
Hello and welcome, everybody. I am George Armistead, and I am with Alvaro Jaramillo. We are here for another episode of Life List, a birding podcast. Alvaro, what's going on, man?
Hi, George. Yeah, we've got rain going on here, which, as you know, West Coast people from drought-stricken areas love to talk about rain. So,
Big.
so it's rain, and there's snow falling in the mountains and the Sierras, so that's good for us, but it's still not enough. Too little, too late. But it's nice to have some rain. You know, that whole April showers, spring, May flowers. That's not the way that California tends to work. So but this time, maybe so.
Yeah. It's been a very fickle month. April always is. It seems like, there's that graphic they got, like, early spring, fake spring, second winter, second fake spring. That thing is going on again here. I think everybody knows there was a big nor'easter type storm came through, dumped snow in a lot of places. We just missed that here, but we got plenty of rain, and then it was down in like the 30s. 30. Yeah, it was like one morning it hit 30 degrees Fahrenheit here. And the morning after that, I had a bird walk scheduled here in Philly for birdphilly.org. We have our regular spring, walks are ticking into place and going now. And I usually do, a couple every spring. And I thought, oh man, nobody's going to show for this. And it was chilly, but we all are facing the same thing here, which is we're anxious for the arrival of the migrants, the warblers. They're coming. We want to see them. There's been a smattering of them around, but yeah, there was 30 of us out there that morning, even though it was like about 40 degrees then. And we had our first blue-headed vireo of the spring for a bunch of us, and a few things around, but it was still pretty cold. But warm weather is coming. The birds are on their way. Can't wait.
Cool. Yeah, no, here, latest information I've had about sort of an event that I haven't experienced it myself is a little what you would call invasion of red phalaropes, the gray phalarope for those in Europe. We focus on the breeding plumage over here. Folks over there focus on the non-breeding plumage. They're both really good names at the right time of year.
That was deftly put. Very very apolitical. It's good.
And what's happening is so a few of them are showing up in coastal little ponds, here and there, which is unusual. Sometimes we'll get a situation where a storm hits in December, and then the red phalaropes, the sort of laggards and wintering birds, get pushed over to the coast, and they're around. But this time it's like they're migrating north from South America and other places, and they are amassing close to shore. Like if you're people who've been looking offshore, sea watching, are seeing masses of red phalaropes, within a mile of shore. And then the question is, okay, so what's happening? It's not really a storm, like there's been raining or whatever, but it's nothing out of the unusual for winds. It might be that the food has, there's no food for them further offshore. And that is interesting. It's happened before that these spring movements, sort of invasion of phalaropes have happened. So, every time it does, then maybe you pick up some information on what is going on. So I haven't been offshore to see this, and we may go offshore this Sunday, weather permitting. But it's interesting and very regional, very specific, to sort of happening in California right now. So, and right on the coast. So it's a fine, small kind of spot where it's happening, yet it could be including the major proportion of this species North American population. So,
man,
weird.
That is strange. Yeah, hopefully not bad news.
Right.
Hopefully it's not too scary. we've certainly seen it with seabirds other times where food is in short supply where it's supposed to be, and they end up in other places. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And it also highlights the fact that we know very little about the ecology of offshore phalaropes. We know that they float around out there and make their little circles and pick off tiny little bits of food from the surface.
Little
They don't
gyres
die.
of water, right?
Yeah. And you would think, oh, well, there has to be food floating around all over the ocean, all over the surface. But in fact, when you do go out there, phalaropes are really concentrated in areas of, I find when two different types of water kind of collide and you get those, what we call rips, and there's all that frothy, stuff where people worry about it being pollution, yet it's sort of natural stuff that's being kind of brought together by water currents. That's where the phalaropes are. So maybe that's what's going on. Those water temperature breaks are not happening, or something else is going on. The way the water is moving may be what's happening, and it may
not favorable for feeding conditions. And,
right.
Yeah.
And we'll see how it progresses. Right. Kind of interesting though.
That is. Well, speaking of seabirds, Alvaro, we should mention for folks that we do have a pelagic outing coming up here. We'll go out of North Jersey that includes, we're hitting the Hudson Canyon. It'll be you, me, Molly Brown, and our interview from a little while back, Dan Lane, will be the leaders. And we'll be searching for shearwaters, storm petrels. Might see some phalaropes on the move.
Yeah,
and hopefully some Jaegers moving.
The whole Lifeless podcast, people all in one place. We should take some mics out.
Yeah.
Record.
Be interesting to try to record offshore there. Well, it is. It's a nice boat. It's a comfortable boat. We're going on the Gambler, which I feel like is a great name for a boat. Where you're going on a pelagic trip. You kind of roll the dice. You never know what you're going to get out there. You could hit the jackpot, or can be less active at other times. But always interesting to see. We'll have the better part of 2 days. Basically, we'll leave midday the first day, and we'll kind of do a slow cruise out. And that'll give us some inshore water searching and some deeper water as we get closer to Hudson Canyon, which is kind of our destination we're working towards. And then we'll spend the night out there. And the boat has pretty good sleeping berths. It's a pretty comfortable boat, good sight lines. And then we'll wake up at dawn the next morning. We'll be right there at the canyon, have pretty much the whole day to work that. And then it's a real fast boat. We'll just rock it home once it's getting close to dark there. And should be back on shore 4 to 5 hours once we turn tail and head ashore. So hope folks will check it out. It's on the Hillstar Nature site.
So I mean, the cool thing is you basically have, floating a hostel. I don't want to say hotel, makes it sound like, you have a in-house room service, but you've got a place to sleep, from what I understand, which allows you to get out there and spend the entire full daylight hour in this deep water area, which I gather is not that common. I mean,
it's not birded very often.
So that's cool. Who knows what we could see?
Yeah. It's a new kind of pelagic, so we're hoping folks will check it out, and be fun to get out there, see what we see. Always in seabirding, there's the chance for something exceptional. Anytime you go out there. Whale. Yeah, now you're talking beaked whales, or other kinds of crazy critters out there. You never know.
If it's beaked, I think you can count it as a bird, right?
Yeah, huh? That's right.
Hey, ABA, listen up. Beaked whales are in.
Yep, that's according to the latest taxonomy, Jaramillo 2022.
2022, yeah, and I'm including all crocodiles and alligators as birds. So
wow.
I'm gonna expand.
That's big changes, man.
Big changes coming. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
you might. Some of your colleagues on the South American Classification Committee might have a few questions for you.
I'll have a few answers. I'm just
Nice.
trying to pad the list. I mean, I'll be
Yeah,
honest. You
well, that's
know,
good.
I,
It's good.
I,
Good for the tour business.
that's
Splits.
right.
We like splits. Lumps not as much most of the time. There's
That's
some
right.
exceptions to that, but
Yeah. The what else you been up to?
not much, man. Yeah, just trying to. I'm waiting for spring, really, and working on Hillstar stuff. Got back from India a couple of weeks ago and working on a trip that we'll offer there in 2024. And just got some other trips I'm working on. But one thing we did not get to last time, Al, we were chatting. Uh, you, me, and Molly. We talked about a few things, but we did not discuss your latest venture to Cuba, which is
Yes.
always a place of fascination for folks and one of your favorite places.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
did
I
that go?
mean, it it went very well. Actually, exceedingly well given the circumstances. I mean, the Cuba always has some issues in terms of the politics of what's going on there, whether Americans are allowed, not allowed, or the American government how it's dealing with travel to Cuba.
Yeah.
The time where things were most open and clear cut were the Obama years.
Mm-hmm.
But believe it or not, I've been going to Cuba. Like my first trips were in the late '90s, which makes
Wow.
me right about one of the most, I don't want to say experienced, but I've been going there for longer than most people have.
Yeah, you've definitely
Um,
led more tours there than just about anybody I know, and have you've been going there a long time.
and it's changed in so many ways, right? From where you could use dollars to you can't use dollars to today's situation where we have one currency. There used to be two currencies. Like there's all of this stuff that's always going on, and you have to be aware of what's happening. Americans actually can go to Cuba. You just have to have a certain very clear a tour that is abiding by the very clear rules of what you can and cannot do and so forth in terms of money and what you can bring back, not bring back, where you can stay. So there's a bunch of rules, and I can see why a lot of tour companies don't go to Cuba, just because it's complicated. But it's amazing. It's an amazing place. It's huge. I mean, there's times when you're sitting in the bus going from point A to point B and sort of saying, "Oh, we're doing this whole drive this afternoon from here to over there," and you think, "Well, it's only a quarter of the way across the map. How can it take this long?" And it's far. It's a
Yeah.
really big country. This year, when I say the circumstances, there was a fuel shortage, so we had to have our ground people making sure that we always had the right fuel available. COVID has you know it shut down the tourism industry in Cuba, which is one of their major ways of gaining revenue. So there were some things that were not quite yet sort of going, happening, some hotels that were closed or you could see them, boarded up in some areas. And when you're thinking, wow, this country's really suffered in a visible way from COVID, but they're happy to have people over and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's always super friendly. And we had great food, great music and all that. So it was a cool, it was great to go back to Cuba. I felt a little bit like a sadness for how hard hit they were by the pandemic, which
Yeah.
obviously we were hard hit in our own way, but a country that relies so much on tourism, especially Canadian and European tourism, and to some extent now this war is even more of a problem for them than other countries in that they've had a direct link to Russian
Mm-hmm.
tourists actually over time, and that's all ended, of course. And I'm sure there was a lot of Ukrainians as well that used to go to Cuba for holidays, but that's all ended. So their kind of link to that part of the world is also a problem. So I felt good to be doing a tour, going back to the places, hiring the local guides, and sort of, seeing, a lot of them were like, "You're the first bird tour back. You're the first people back here, so we're looking forward to more." And that felt good, where you feel like you're making some kind of economic help to areas that are often not that, little
and
tiny
some
towns in the middle
psychological
of
relief
nowhere.
too, I imagine. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I bet for some of these folks, just the act of like seeing a tour group coming through the area where they have worked for so long, what they were
Yeah.
accustomed to, I'm sure that there's some serious psychological benefit to that
Yeah.
as well. Just
No,
a sense of
definitely.
relief. Yeah.
And, there also, it was great to see things like there were some spots where we had sort of lost the Cuban gnatcatcher due to the hurricane of, what was it, 2017 or 16.
Yeah, that was one of
And
my questions I wanted to ask you about, actually.
they're back. The habitat looks much better. They're even it wasn't too difficult to find the Bahama mockingbird, which is another one that suffered during that hurricane because it hit exactly where they live. On the other hand, while we're talking about the lack of tourists right now, they're planning on tourists being back there in the future. So there are these massive hotels being built in some of the most, greatest spots for birds, like the thick-billed vireo, where we used to see them regularly before the hurricane. And now you realize they got hit by the hurricane, and now they're getting hit by a big infrastructure project, probably European money, is my guess. And I mean, there's part of it. It's like, well, we're sort of part of the problem. We're loving Cuba to death. We're loving these places to death. And unfortunately, some countries, as we talked about in the past, have chosen to go about a system of tourism that is really lower key, smaller groups, smaller places, families, family run. Cuba is a place where everything is sort of big and run by bigger entities. So it's going to be sort of a big hotel rather than 15, 20 families running smaller spots where they're kind of a little bit more in tune with the local habitats and so forth. So you can see, what we've talked about in the past. It's like, boy, you know why people want to go to Cuba, but this is partially, decreasing the habitat values and even the beauty of the place by making these big old buildings and places, happening all over the world.
Yeah, it's tough. Tourism is great in many ways and difficult to manage in others. And that's why we like to think of sustainable ways to do it as much as we can.
Right, exactly. And, the other thing, Cuba is fantastic for its number of species that you can see there, especially the number of specialties endemics is probably higher than what we think, given that it'll change as taxonomy changes. But we also have a lot of mysteries. Before we got on here, we were talking about Zapata rail, a bird that hasn't been seen. Well, people have seen it apparently recently, but there's no proof that they've seen it. I mean, the last sort of proof of somebody seeing one is a while ago. Cuban kite is another one. There are other mysteries like the ivory-billed woodpecker.
The ivory-billed woodpecker.
That's right.
Not sure if I've ever heard of that one before.
Well, if you saw Woody Woodpecker, the cartoon, that was an ivory-billed.
No, I don't think that's true.
That was an ivory-billed.
Really?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I see. All right. Before we get too far derailed, I do think this is an important point to clarify because Woody Woodpecker was one of my favorites, and I still remember seeing my first.
Boy.
Oh, he was fantastic. That's part of his genius is that he was annoying.
Yeah, Heckle and Jekyll. Now we're talking.
I remember a detail back in the days of ID Frontiers, and I think you might have been a part of this conversation.
Oh, yeah, because because I know the answer.
What I had heard was that the likeness. This is my recollection. I'm happy to be corrected, because this is was my understanding, was that its likeness was supposed to be a pileated woodpecker, but that the inspiration was actually the acorn woodpecker. Was the bird with I'm trying to remember who the artist was. It was not a Chuck Jones one, right? It was somebody else, I think, right?
Well,
but yeah, what? Tell me what you know. I want to know.
There's this episode when he's on a train. He's avoiding these guys. I think they're trying to catch him. Yeah. And he opens up a book in the train, and it's like a wanted poster.
Yeah.
And the wanted poster's got Woody Woodpecker on it, and it says Camphophilus principalis, I think it is, at the bottom. And and maybe the plot of the whole thing got lost on me, but I just remember seeing that, already being a kid interested in birds, and thinking, Woody Woodpecker's an Ivory-billed woodpecker, and it stuck with me now into my graying years.
I see. I remember this part of the story, and I remember thinking, okay, I completely believe all of what you are telling me now, but that also does not, to me, confirm that it was an ivory-billed woodpecker. And this is not the debate on the ivory-billed woodpecker I thought we might end up having today, but
it just tells you that this bird is basically a walking debate, because no matter what. So you're trying to tell me about its origin history, but I'm trying to tell you of the one time it was labeled as what it was. It said it was an ivory-billed woodpecker.
I guess in your view, perhaps that is more of a defining moment for its identity whereas I might argue that it could be seen merely as a plot line for that particular episode. But
it could be, but they could have named that anything else.
This is true.
They could have put.
They could have put heart-spotted woodpecker,
Yeah, I know.
That would have been tougher stretch.
Yeah. The idea too that something came up recently is that woodpeckers they're often all over the world. There's like two different size classes of a type of woodpecker.
Yeah,
and it's thought
Downy
often
Harry
that
is common one we know around here. Yeah,
right. And Downy and Harry aren't closely related to each other. They're within the same group, but they're not each other's closest relatives. So Harry is the white-headed woodpecker's closest relative, and the pileated and ivory-billed forming a sort of a duo of is an interesting idea, because Camphophilus and the lineated woodpecker, which is related to the pileated in
Trichopus,
down in Central South America, they definitely mimic. There's a mimicry aspect of their plumage. Nobody understands exactly why this could be, but the data suggests something is going on. That woodpeckers often will mimic a larger size class of woodpecker, and then you think, well, gosh, if that's the case, and the ivory-billed woodpecker is gone for most, for basically gone, it's what has happened to the pileated without its, mimic partner? Its model, as they call it.
Right. If it doesn't have this relationship anymore with this this bird.
It's a viceroy without its monarch in the butterfly world. I
feel like that's a good book title for something. Yeah.
Yeah. But you do wonder what the ecological change that happened because of that and other aspects, and even maybe the behavioral. There could have been a behavioral sort of boxing in of the pileated originally, that due to its interactions that didn't happen afterwards. Who knows? But I thought that's kind of an interesting thing. But I mean, in terms of the Cuba, the ivory-billed was actually seen there into the 80s.
Yes.
And photographs, good photographs, at least into, I think, the late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah. There was like a team of biologists, right, that went there in the early mid 80s and saw it.
Right.
Saw, if not one, several.
Right. And in the 40s, when they were almost gone from the US, there were places that had, like you could go see 7 ivory-billed woodpeckers in this one spot, I think in Cuba, out in the east, not a place where the bird tours go, and not a place where anybody really goes. There are some big forests, mountainous forests, pine mostly. And it's interesting to think that pine may have been key in these big woodpeckers. We think of ivory bills as being these bottomland forest birds, and perhaps that's where that was what was left over. That was sort of decent habitat. But if you think of the East, there used to be old growth pine. A lot of old growth pine, and we're talking the old growth pine is a different looking beast of a forest than regular old scrubby pine forest. And the imperial woodpecker in Mexico, also a pine forest bird. So I think it's interesting that Cuba doesn't have many pines, only in certain parts of the mountains. And that's where the woodpecker was. It's like it was in pine. And could it still be there? Maybe, because there really haven't been that many, if any, teams going into the area.
Right. That it has not been that thoroughly surveyed compared to, say, the southeastern U.S. or
right.
well, maybe not even relative to anything, but it just hasn't been that thoroughly surveyed.
And now we're talking about this because there's sort of this preprint of that's. I think it's really crazy that something that hasn't really been published yet was flaunted out there to the public
and picked up by major media outlets.
Media, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what's going to happen to the paper, but these folks have said they've, photographed with trail cameras ivory-billed woodpeckers in Louisiana. And let me tell you, this would be the best news ever if we could all agree that we're seeing and they've detected an ivory-billed woodpecker. To me, what's out there is almost like, gosh, it's like I can see where they're getting their thought process on it. The way that some of the images kind of look like they have a bird might be standing. But the thing is that the images are so poor that really, I mean, I could, there's better photos of Bigfoot than this, I mean.
Yeah, I think that's the, I mean, I don't know that I'm capable of defining the sort of metastasizing debate about this species that just seems to grow and grow over the years, and I think is frustrating on both sides to folks. But it seems like there's the folks who just want to believe, and they that's one side of it. But really, in reality, everybody wants to believe, but there's folks that are just like, we need proof that we can really sink our teeth into, that like, and I think what, I'll confess, I fall into sort of the skeptical side of this argument. In fact, this is something me and my father, when the ivory-bills were reported in 2004, he went and searched for them both in Louisiana and in Arkansas. He was part of search teams, and he was a firm believer that these things were there. And we used to get into some real debates because I just wasn't, happy with the evidence that was there, and eventually at our family dinners, we get together every 3 weeks, once a month or something, for a big family dinner. And my sisters and my mom were like, okay, you two, shut up. Like, you're not allowed to talk about ivory-billed woodpeckers anymore. This is like, you don't agree, and like, you're talking past each other. Let's just like talk about anything else. Talk about sports. Talk about politics, even. But you guys are not talking about ivory-billed woodpeckers anymore. But I do remember getting to one point with my dad, and he was saying, I was like, Dad, I think you're thinking with your heart and not with your head. And he said, he was like, you might be right, but I don't care. And I think I'm paraphrasing. I don't think that's quite what he said, but I think once he got to that point, I was like, I think we can leave this alone now. I think we can leave
Well,
this discussion behind.
I remember in the original, what, this 15 years ago that the last version of this happened, and John Fitzpatrick of Cornell did a press, sort of a live press kind of conference, with the details, and they said this conference is going to happen. I don't know how I dialed into it somehow, online, and I remember
Everybody did. It
weeping.
was
I was
yeah,
crying
yeah.
with
Huge
the
news.
emotion of this. And then later, as we sort of got to sort of calmly look at the info and assess what they'd seen and heard, and also get David Sibley's thought process on why we were sort of duped by the imagery, I felt like, dang, like I went all the way with this immediately because I so fervently wanted to believe. So I'm even more kind of, I want real, solid
right. You're
proof.
like once bitten, twice shy, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it takes us, if you want to get a good, your record of a little stint accepted for anywhere in North America by the records committees, you have to have much more solid proof than these folks that are coming out and saying essentially the most important species in bird species. Let's put it that way, in North America, in people's hearts. Is
it's
still
literally
here.
It's literally referred to as the Lord God bird. Like that's its nickname. I think that that's not coincidental. Like that, it is that important to people.
So I feel like I think it's great that some people are making the argument to. I know Ken Kaufman today wrote about this. That it's great that people are out there looking and have hope and so forth, and that's the great story. And I think that I agree with that. I just think that given the importance of this bird, the details and info that has to come out to actually say it's here has to be foolproof. Like, George and I would be weeping on this show together, kind of thing. But this is far from it.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's, I can't believe that it's actually gotten to the point where we're talking about it. It might even be irresponsible for us to talk about it, given how little.
Well, I think it's picked up enough. It's picked up enough traction that it's like I know that because we've been in touch this week, both of us, and anybody that is into birds as much as we are, non-birding friends, people that are sort of generally interested in nature, they're seeing this in the news and they're saying, "What do you think of it?" And so, and that is the amazing thing, is how much this has picked up traction, despite it not being peer reviewed at all. And it is, my first reaction was, I think, similar to yours. Is a friend of mine here in Philly. She says, I saw this bird and I got the receipts. And she means like she has photos to prove what she saw. Like, and these folks are saying they have photos, but the photos are, they're not identifiable. I think it was somebody pointed out, like all the photos, it's not a good sign that they all come on foggy days. Like, they mentioned that in their presentation. At any rate, it was unsatisfying, quote, information to review if you are looking for solid evidence that these things are still out there. And I think it's important that everyone remember, we all want ivory-billed woodpeckers to be out there. We all want to think about them flying around big trees and doing double knocks and, giving their clarinet Kent calls. Like that's something that echoes, in your soul, is something that if you've dreamed about birds and thought about birds for a long time, we all want to think that experience, could still be had, and that these things could live. It's just that, it's the old Sagan quote: "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence."
Right. And, I don't think there's anything malicious. The people writing this information and seeing these things, I think they really, are on, you know, they this is what the conclusion they've come to, and I think
Right.
that's
They reached
fine.
their
There's nothing
conclusion honestly in their way.
right, and that's how science works. You put out a hypothesis and so forth. Now, I think where the responsibility is the journal. If a journal publishes this and goes through the peer review and the editorial process, and sort of discounts the fact that these photos and so forth and all the issues with this are
Flimsy.
really, flimsy, that they sort of say, well, this really needs to get out there. I'm not sure it does. I think this is where you sort of say, I think you have part of the story. Give yourself another 6 months to actually get the real photos if this thing exists. Because if it exists, and they know where it is because they have photographs of the trees, they will actually get those real photos.
Yes.
There's no reason why a full frame photo, if the bird exists and they know where it is, where it'll happen. And this is another conversation me and you got into, and actually, I sort of polled people out on Facebook on this. Are there birds that are unseeable that exist?
Right.
And
an ivory-billed woodpecker would not fall into this category because
no.
it is a loud and territorial bird that is conspicuous. Like that, birds in that genus, woodpeckers in general, are territorial, vocal, and move around a good bit.
Yeah. I mean, even the very quiet woodpeckers, right? Sapsuckers are very quiet. But there are times of the year when they're super loud, like their nests are really loud. Like the racket in the forest in late summer is a sapsucker nest. And when they drum, I mean, sapsucker drumming, especially if you have a cabin or cottage in sapsucker country, they love to drum on those, on your house sometimes. So it's sure, it can be hard to find a sapsucker at a certain point in time when you're like looking for them and they go on the other side of the tree trunk and they're like, wow, that's a stealthy woodpecker now, but not when they're looking for mates, and not when they're at the nest. They're actually really easily findable.
And not if you got camera traps and you got audio, audio recording units out there. These are birds that by their nature, by their habits and behavior, lend themselves to being documented.
Right.
And I think those of us that have served on records committees and who have spent time evaluating, reports of rare birds, like you were saying before about like a little stint, you look at a body of evidence, and it's hard to look at this and think, how did they reach these conclusions?
Yeah. And, in the question of what's not findable, there were some interesting, there are some birds that may be extinct, so they're not findable. Could be, something like kinglet calyptra, that was seen 20 years ago, but hasn't been seen again. So it may just be gone. But there are these others that are super shy that that are difficult to find. But like this Luzon button quail, which is in the Philippines, is one that somebody mentioned. But yet, they're not seen. They're not seen by birders, but actually they're caught in mammal traps. So we know they exist, but that mere fact that they were caught in a mammal trap, you could have photographed them with a mammal, a camera, or the fact that they're walking into traps means that you can actually confirm they're there. Right? So everything, in a sense, is confirmable. There are some of these birds. There was another group of them that seem to be really low density and birds that move around due to habitat changes. And some of them are rails or fluff tails. So, speckled rail is one of them that may be in southern South America, just moving from from one little wet grassland to another when the
Occupies in
situation.
ephemeral areas where
Yeah.
they're forced to move and thus difficult to predict where they might be.
Right. And yellow rail could be like that in North America. I mean, there are marshes, sedge marshes that set up in certain places, and suddenly some birder pops by and goes, "Oh my gosh, there's yellow rails here," and they're there 2 or 3 years, and then they leave.
Right.
I mean,
but if nobody checks some of these areas in South America, then
right, nobody's going to see them. Yet speckled rail shows up regularly, kind of downtown Buenos Aires or the edge of Montevideo, these big cities, because they're actually flying through at night, and then they get disoriented, and they're actually photographed, and some of them have been photographed and hand banded and so forth. So again, like really hard to find birds, but they're seen, they're detected. There are a few others that are a little bit tougher, but I think essentially all birds are findable, and the ones that are really, really hard tend to be really, really sneaky little brown things in the grass. They're not
understory
big black and
marsh
white
dwellers. Yeah, like understory of forest, marsh dwelling birds, or nocturnal species. And if you think about the number of birds we're talking about, I mean, what are there, 12,000, 15,000 species of birds in the world or more? And the number of birds we're talking about that are super hard to document via photo or video is, I mean, really small. It's like really small. And none of them are big woodpeckers that are vocal and territorial.
Right. And I know that I think some people are going to be listening to this and going, gosh, they're just being naysayers and just negative Nellies. Debbie Downers. And we admit.
What else you got?
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. yeah. So there's an element of, that's true. We're being skeptical, maybe exceedingly so in some cases, because we care and we would love to have this information be real. And it has to go through a filter of really prove it, because we need that kind of information, and not just for our ivory-billed woodpeckers, Zapata rails. We need to find these birds that are out there and conclusively, so that we can then muster the resources we need to preserve them in that last, it's important. This is important stuff.
Yeah, you can't help any of these birds. You can't do the conservation work until you prove that they really are there. And, it's just, I think it's frustrating for everybody to have this debate over and over again. But it is such, I think you framed the question really well, Alvaro, that we had this discussion on social media about, what are these? Like, what's an example of a bird that is actually undocumentable, or there weren't really many concrete answers to that. There's a bunch of birds that are really furtive, hard to find, but
there's some at a mountaintop on an island, near New Guinea or something, where you're like, okay, well, that's just hard to get to, isn't it? And there's probably land leeches everywhere. And okay, so. But is it if you gave it 6 months, you probably could find it,
maybe much less 3 or 4 years. Like, like if you really want to find it, you can do it,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, if you sort of turning the question backwards on, in itself, this idea of the ivory-billed being unfindable because it's evolved almost to be this ghost is where you are going into legend and lore. And it's a beautiful story, and it makes a lot of sense to us because it's a great story, but it doesn't pan out at all with the reality of birds and the reality of woodpeckers, especially.
That's one of the points that I kind of raised on one of the discussions I was having. Is I was like, I think, we have to remember that human beings love a simple story, and fitting things to a narrative. You got to remember to actually look at the strength of the evidence,
Right.
And I think that's what, being skeptical doesn't mean that you're negative.
Right.
That's not what the definition of a skeptic is. A skeptic just wants to look at evidence and see that it's strong. Like I think if you're going to be wowed, you want to be wowed by really strong evidence.
Right. I mean, some of these birds that have been rediscovered or brand new species. I mean, Dan Lane's 2 big finds in terms of new species for the world. They're like wow birds, where you're thinking like, oh my God, look at that thing. It's got colors all over the place. And those are some of the most exciting things, I think, when you have really good evidence of something that is unimaginable in a sense. So we just want that.
Yeah, exactly. And in a lot of the cases of the species that came up in the conversation you started on Facebook, it was amazing how many times people went back, well, this bird was like that until we documented its voice. And that happened again and again and again, right? There was numerous accounts. And I even spoke to Dan the other day about, long-whiskered owlet. And even once they had the voice, it still took them a while to document the bird, but they did, And in this case, for the ivory-billed woodpecker, we've had recordings of the voice for, decades, many decades.
Yeah. And I got to say too, just shifting a little bit, if people are on Twitter and they look up Alexander Lees, I think he might go under Alex Lees.
Yes, yeah.
Alex Lees, and he's an ornithologist birder, and he has a really thoughtful set of points as to how he evaluates the new ivory-billed woodpecker situation. And I wanted to mention him too because along with James Gilroy, he just wrote a new book that has just come out in North America, called Vagrancy in Birds. And it's a family by family account of, lost birds. And I think, when you get a copy, George, we should talk a little bit more about this book, but it may be the first actual book on one of the things that drives a lot of birders, which is rare birds, vagrancy, right? We've had the rare birds type books.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like, let's look at all the birds in the world and sort of the general
family
patterns of
family
vagrancy,
account.
Family by family. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you do for rent it. You probably, it's like, one time there was one that moved a mile,
It's a shorter chapter of the rent it.
That's right. But it's a fascinating book. And maybe we'll just leave that as a teaser for now. And we'll maybe get back to that once we've kind of had a chance to look at it in more detail. Princeton University Press, by the way.
Yeah, and Alex Lees is somebody that can, given that that's the book he's written, he carries some weight when it comes to his discussion of the ivory-billed woodpecker. One thing I wanted to turn back and ask your opinion on, Alvaro. You mentioned
night parrot.
They mentioned that when the ivory-bills were seen, again in Cuba in the mid '80s by that team. I think it was Lester Short or Jerry Jackson, and
I think they both were involved.
Yeah, and some Cubans as well. I don't know if Arturo Kirkconnell was a part of that group or not.
Yeah, it may have been Garrido, but
Orlando Garrido. Yeah. But I thought you would be interested to know how I first learned about that story, because I remember when it happened, and my father. This was in the 80s, mind you, right? This is I want to say it's 84, 85, 86, somewhere in there. Maybe it's somewhere in there. And I'm at home.
I think it's 85, 86, maybe here.
That sounds right.
Quickly looking it up. Yeah.
Because I remember I was recently into birds, and I had done we had this science night kind of thing at my middle school, and my project was on the Ivory-billed woodpecker, and I was like super into it. And my
So
dad,
you've been thinking about this for a long time, the Ivory Bill.
yeah, man, like I definitely dreamed of seeing this thing many times, as I'm sure all of us have. But like, since I was like 10, 11, 12, whatever, I've been like, yeah, like I remember I still somewhere I've got the poster I did. I did a painting, and I am no kind of artist, but I actually did a pretty decent job on this Ivory-billed woodpecker. I worked hard on it. And I remember my dad came into, I was like in the backyard doing something, and he comes in holding a copy of People magazine. And he's like, George, look at this. And in People magazine, there was like a 1 to 2 page article about the sighting of the ivory-billed woodpecker in Cuba and this team of folks. And I was like, not only flabbergasted that the things have been seen in Cuba, but I was flabbergasted that this article was in People magazine of all places. It's like, it's like both almost equally amazing things,
For you trivia folks out there, how many times have bird things been on People magazine? That'd be a good one for you guys to go and search out.
A paltry few, I gotta think.
But, I didn't look up the info on this. This is a trivia question that I was going to pose to you, but maybe I'll just pose it anyways to see if this is a true or false situation. But you see, George loves bar trivia. Those bar trivia things,
Quizzo,
like,
pub quiz. I am all in on that. Yeah, love that.
He loves that stuff. I've actually never done one. So one day I will get together with George and I will see how this works.
Yeah, we got to do that.
I imagine knowledge of scientific names is not very helpful in pub trivia, right? You probably have to know sports, right?
Yeah, sports helps. Geography, yeah.
Sports I really do poorly on, but anyway. But so I was told that the Guinness Book of World Records was created by Guinness, the company that brews the beer, the Irish company.
Got some in the fridge
in order to have a set of trivia for trivia night back in the day, like I guess in the 30s, 20s or whatever, that Guinness Book of World Records is actually the original standard for pub trivia night. Now, is that true or is that not true? But
that is juicy, Alvaro. That is juicy. If true or not, that is a juicy tidbit that I think I'm going to start sharing around. Yeah.
Because at first I think I was drinking a Guinness one point. And I said, "Are these the same people as the world records? With the guy with the long nails and stuff?"
Always good at asking questions. Yeah.
Somebody said, "Yes, they are." Then I'm like, "Well, that makes no sense." I mean, that's kind of like the first time I heard of Nokia was because there was a Swedish birder I met who had Nokia rubber boots, and then later they're making phones. I don't know, but I just thought they were boot people. So I had no idea that they were the same Guinness. So that would actually link them together. So, and that is, as you said, a meta trivia question.
It really is. It's like a little trivia turducken. It's really nice. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I don't even know if Guinness Book of World Records has any bird stuff in it, does it?
I don't know. You know what I remember is like the guy with like the longest mustache in the world, and like the guy with the longest fingernails, and some dude that tried to smoke the most cigarettes at one time ever and then died like half hour later,
Right.
All the crazy
the nail
pictures.
Guy is the guy that I remember because I was like, no, and now it's just like it was almost like grotesque to the point where you're like, that cannot be, that
those little black and white photos in that book was like, it was like you marvel at those and be like, oh my God, this is a disaster of humanity, really. But like, you got to admire their dedication.
And it's a very much, it was back in the day that black and white book was a real boy thing. I mean, I remember like the boys would get together and go, oh my God, look at that, and then all of our female friends
Just roll their eyes.
would roll their eyes and say, "Why are they so interested in this?"
They're probably like, I
disgusting
hope these
book,
boys never get an anarchist cookbook as well. It was just like,
right. Yeah. And then I hope these boys never wind up in a pub. Yes. It all goes together, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just sit around talking trivia. But yeah, you have to have, when you don't have, we're not allowed to talk about feelings or anything back in those days. You have to talk about trivia.
That's right. Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Yeah. But about our feelings now, don't we? Look at us.
Yeah, look at us. Like you said, we'll cry when we see the actual Lord God bird photos.
Mm-hmm.
But we are at this point in time firmly, thinking I'm not swayed whatsoever.
Hey, let me ask you one more question about the woodpecker. I have heard I have two taxonomic questions about it. I'm curious for your take. I have my own opinions, but I'm curious for the Alvaro view on these two matters. One is that the ivory-billed woodpeckers in Cuba should be a different subspecies than those in North America.
They are a different subspecies.
Okay, they are. All right.
No, the question is whether they're a different species.
Different species, right. I'm sorry. Yeah. And then the other question was whether they should really be a part of, like, if Campephalus should be rearranged, and maybe that those would actually not fall within Campephalus. I don't remember the way that Campephalus, the genus, was supposed to be rearranged, but I remember when people were saying, well, if you compare the Campephalus here to ivory-billed, and some people were like, well, yeah, but like, maybe you can't really compare those because they shouldn't even be in the same genus. And all of that sounded flimsy to me, but I was curious if it had ever, piqued your curiosity.
Yeah. The Cuba question, I think, is an interesting one because there was a paper done some while ago on using what they call ancient DNA from specimens, and they found that the genetic difference, I think, in mitochondrial DNA between the Cuban one and the U.S. one was sizable. So even though the birds differ in size and I think minor plumage differences, that it was different enough that there was a suggestion made that they could be different species. But that sort of died on the vine, I think, because, well, we don't have any biological info. Like we don't know if they call differently or anything. If, let's say, Cuban ivory bills were refound and we get a good recording, because I don't think there's a recording of a Cuban one, then that would be of interest, and you might sort of say, that these are
might really deserve to be separated.
Right. And I think there was also maybe people just were uncomfortable with such an iconic bird suddenly, like, just separating it out like that, like a different species, even if it's a Cuban population. But the other thing, I'm trying to remember how the sort of family tree of this group of woodpeckers fell out, but
it might have been, that the people, we've compared Magellanic woodpecker in the past because that's a temperate Campephalus. And I think maybe that's what I'm remembering, is that some folks were saying, but that's different than the tropical ones.
I think so. If you were gonna look at the genus, as far as I know, the ivory-billed group, with the imperial, they're a sister group, and they have a common ancestor that is still sort of its sister to the rest of Campephalus or Campophyllus, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And then the Magellanic is kind of the outside group of the rest of the South American ones. So it is an oddball in itself, and it may be, if depending on what analyses you do, it may actually come out to be closer to the ivory-billed group. Maybe not.
Right.
it's kind of in between. But I think one of the important things about that is even though it's not that far off, right? Even if it's not the same group, or if you decide to separate the ivory-bills as a different genus,
Still
it's
probably a decent homologue. Yeah.
Right. And it is a temperate. See, all the other in the group are tropical or montane temperate, but not kind of lowland temperate, or, let's put it like high latitude temperate birds. And Magellanic is. It's in forests that get cold in the winter. It's resident. It's in big old trees that are not tropical or subtropical kind of rainforesty places, So it's a good model in many ways.
I don't know. You hear a pale-billed woodpecker do that double knock, and it does stir your heart a little bit, though, too, doesn't it?
Yeah. And, I don't know about a lot of the other Latin American species, but the Magellanic really, really takes to old forest. Like it's easiest to find it when you have trees that are several hundred years old.
Right.
So that too makes me think, okay, this thing is a little bit more ivory-billed-ish, and it's got the curlicue crest as a female. I mean, let's face it, that's
so
something.
Nice. Man, that is a bird. Another one that'll stir your heart. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Alvaro, I think we are coming up on the hour here. And it's time for us to scoot. I know you got to run and run a few errands, and I can feel my face again. I had mentioned to folks that I'd come from the dentist, had a little bit of work done, and the lidocaine has now actually worn off, and I can feel my face, which is both kind of reassuring, but also
this now you know what Chris Rock felt like after.
I'm so mad at Will Smith still. I'm so mad at him. But
if Philadelphia ever gave him the key to the city, they better take it back.
Yeah.
Put a different lock on that city.
Yeah. The Sixers are doing good stuff right now, and he is actually I think he has a minority share of the Sixers. He could not show up the game right now. Not that he ever has. That's always kind of a weird thing that he's never been at the games. But anyway, before we get going here, Alvaro, anything you want to tell the good people out there?
Well, we actually, in terms of tours coming up, we had a cancellation on our Birds and Wine South Africa. One spot, not for a couple, unfortunately. So if somebody is keen on that, go to alvarosadventures.com and try to contact me.
That's a good one
is a fantastic trip. Anything where you do birds and something else, I find are some of the most fun trips.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that's a good trip. I've done that one myself, and that is a really good trip. So yeah, folks should definitely check out Birds and Wine South Africa and Alvaro's Adventures. And any others you got coming up?
I've got locally here. There's a group that does conservation of our redwood forests, talking about old growth trees. Sempervirens Fund, and I'll be talking with them on their next live event next Tuesday. Sorry, I don't have the time, but they're also going to put together a little guide for birding the redwoods, little small short thing that we can link to later. So for any West Coasters who are interested in that. But these groups, part of the reason I do these things is just get the word out, not only of birding to those folks that might be hikers and conservationists, but also to get the conservation message to the birders. A sort of little back and forth that we need to have to make it all work out long term for everybody, the habitat and the birds.
Yeah. Nice. Good one. Yeah. Well, I should tell you, Al, I am taking a page out of your book, and I am going to do a little, I hope a little fundraising for local conservation here as well. And Kristen and I are going to do a walking big day here in Philadelphia. Yeah. I don't know that we will quite do 24 hours. But it's like a little bit of different structure, but folks, hopefully we'll keep an eye out. We're going to try to raise a little bit of money for Bird Safe Philly. which
That's
does
great.
lights out work here, and trying to keep lights out during migration, and also window work against window strikes. So check out birdsafephilly.org, and
That's
we'll
great.
be doing our donations through dvoc.org, Delaware Valley
DVOC.
Birdological Club. So.
I heard recently American Bird Conservancy folks are doing a big walk in Washington at some point, I think in May or so. This is kind of picking up. Suddenly, the little the big walk concept, I think, is
birding and walking, or it's nice. Pretty spring, you get a nice day. It's pretty tough to beat. Tough combo to beat. Yeah.
I know. I think you'll be surprised at how, if you've done big days before with cards and so forth, the idea that you cannot go back, like that you're like, oh, still need mallard, and that pond is like a mile back there. It's like, you're not going to want to walk back to that pond. Just better mallard better fly over or whatever, gadwall. Yeah. I don't know what the species would be, but there's an element of that is actually really interesting. Like as you think about your maximizing your species, that you start running, when you run out of time, you can't zip to A, B, or C. You just got
you got to get what you can get.
So you have to be paying attention. That one merlin or sharpshin hawk that flies over, if you're not paying attention, that second that thing goes over, you've missed your one chance. That's it. It's like real.
That's it.
Great way to bird. It's actually a lot of fun. And you don't have to do it. I think I'm actually might be writing an article about big walks on for the new BWD. That's Birdwatchers Digest, the new magazine. So I'll get your take on it.
We definitely got to talk about that, and we want to chat with those folks too as things kick into gear there. That'll be exciting. A lot going on there.
So, lots. Shining sort of new thing happening from sort of the phoenix has risen or something.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if you can hear my dog is dreaming over here. I should go wake him from what might be either a nightmare or a very good dream. I can't tell which. But at any rate, thanks everybody for listening. It's been a fun one, and look forward to your feedback and questions. Thanks, too, to our producer, Molly Brown. We will get her back. Hope you come join us offshore. And, we look forward to hearing from everybody. Alvaro, have a great day.
Yeah, you too, George. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Cheers, folks.